Hello, it's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and it's our regular Tuesday session where we've got a doorbell ringing because I've got my dog walker coming in and dropping the dog back just as we kick off. So this is the benefits of live streaming. So you get all sorts of things that happen in the background. It's not only Amazon parcels, it can be dogs being delivered. So my guest today is Neil Jinks. So we'll get Neil in. How are you, Neil?
I'm very well, thanks, Lee. How are you?
You couldn't have timed that better, could you? The doorbell ringing just as we go live. So
Well,
hopefully she's got a key, so she should let herself in, and we'll be sorted. So, all right. So, sorry.
Just to say, I thought it'd be my son breaking through the door. So perhaps that'll happen later.
Yeah, you never know. We've had cats, we've had animals, we have children, you name it, we've had it. It just happens. It's all part of this working from home lark that we're all doing these days. So very, very different. So we normally start at the beginning. So tell us about your beginning then. So where did you grow up? Tell us a bit about your parents, what they did for a living, the kind of things you did as a child, hobbies, interests, what you're doing at school, those kind of things. And that'll start our journey from that point onwards. Is that okay?
Well, yeah, that's a lot to remember now, 50, Lee, but I grew up
I'm 60 this year, so,
you're looking good on it.
You wait.
I've got that to look forward to.
Definitely.
So, I grew up in an area called Bartley Green and Harborne in Birmingham.
Oh, yeah.
So a proud Brummie, but, I've spent my life, I guess, trying to escape Birmingham as much as I love it. And I've achieved that in some way, but... I love my school years, and at school, I guess I excelled at business studies, really. And that was my love from a very early age. I wanted to work in business or have my own business. And, for example, I'd take over my dad's shed and turn it into a shop and things like that. So he would be outraged because things would go missing out of the house, out of the kitchen.
Because you'd sold them.
Well, I've taken them to the shed and put a price on them at least. So if you wanted it back, you could come and have your colander back for £5 kind of thing. So,
okay, yeah. That's quite enterprising, really, selling your parents' items back to themselves.
Well, exactly, yeah. So, it makes me think of the business studies course at school. So I was the first year of GCSE, and obviously we had to pick our options. And so I chose business studies. But the great thing about it back then, it was a combined option, business and information studies. So you got 2 GCSEs for the price of one.
Oh,
and
as part
of the course, we had to run our own business. So me and my friends set up a tuck shop and did very well with it. And we did a magazine as well. And I absolutely loved that course. A great teacher we had back then. And as part of the course, again, you had the opportunity to apply for a job with a local law firm. And at the time, I said to the teacher, I don't want a job. I want to continue with my studies. I want to go to college or university. And she said, Neil, it's just an exercise. You're filling a form in, you're creating your CV, you're going for an interview. It's just an experience, to help you in the future. If you decide not to take the job, that's fine. They'll just take the next candidate. So anyway, going back, God, to think that's 34 years ago now, I went for this interview on my local high street, a firm called Cartwright and Lewis in Harborne, and had an interview with the 2 office managers. And I just couldn't get a word in. They were just talking at me, saying, oh, it's wonderful here, you'll love it. And I thought, I left the interview and got on the bus and thought, I can't imagine they would ever offer me the job on the back of that interview, because I didn't get to say more than 2 words. But, it was a time before mobile phones, and that's another story I can come on to. But so by the time I get home, there's a telephone call to say you've got the job. And I was shocked. And basically, they'd made this decision.
You must have been posh having a phone at home, though, at that then. We had one on the corner, I remember. No, we did. When I was leaving home at 17, we did have a phone by then.
Yeah, I remember at my grandma's, although my grandma had a telephone in her neighbourhood, there was a phone box, and yeah, people used to be queuing up for it because they hadn't got a phone at home, you know.
Yeah,
But,
you'd arrange times to actually speak to people, wouldn't you? And
well,
you'd go and
exactly.
stand at the box, and one of you'd phone each other. You know,
Well,
the
yeah.
mobile phone world, is completely different. You had to be mobile to get to the phone, rather than the phone be mobile with you. Then,
Well, I remember that because I'd go and use the phone box, for example, if I wanted to call a friend, and you'd have a girl waiting. I'm speaking to my boyfriend at 7 o'clock. You can't make the call, whatever. But so I was really shocked to get this job offer, and the feedback subsequently was that I had the neatest handwriting on the application form. They liked my CV. They were looking for some staff photos, and I'd put interests photography. But I was no great photographer, but they loved that, So
you sold yourself early on, then, by the sound of things.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that job was as an office junior, and but it was a great introduction to the law as a career. And it's funny to think back. I was having a sort out the other day, and I found the offer letter on a small piece of paper typed on a manual typewriter. Back then we hadn't got a computer on every desk. I remember in that firm when they had the first word processor delivered, and I think it was an Acorn computer. And they literally built a new room that looked space age for this Acorn computer sat in the middle. And everyone used to stare into this room as if it was Star Trek or something.
Yeah.
So
computers were very different, weren't they, in those days?
Oh God, yeah. So it's funny how times change, really. So, it was a time before computers. Our secretaries had manual typewriters with Tipex. I did go out and buy a mobile phone when I was 17 on the back of this new job, earning 40 quid a week, And I remember going to Curry's in Sally Oak in Birmingham. And obviously I was in a suit after work. And so they quite happily sold me this mobile phone at a time when people didn't have them, but it was on a contract. But I got home and my dad was outraged. He read this contract and literally chased me up the stairs, and I locked myself in my bedroom, and he literally broke the door down to get me and this phone and drag us back to Curry's to return it. And the guy said, he signed a contract. He said, well, he's 17, he's not old enough to sign a contract. So perhaps my dad should have been a lawyer rather than a roofer, but
you never know.
But I mean, my dad sort of fell into careers based on the family tradition, really, because a lot of the family worked at what was Austin Rover at the time. I don't know if that's because we're a quarter Austin, in the family, but I don't think it's the same Austin family. But his brothers worked there, so he followed them into that career. He loved it there. Eventually, it was time to move on. And another brother worked in the roofing trade, so he followed him into that. And he absolutely loved it because he worked with a great gang of guys, great rapport between them, and became great friends, really. So that was his career. And actually, my older brother followed him into that career and had a great time. My mom had always worked in pharmacies, for Boots and Lloyd's and other chemists. But she was great with people. I'd go and see her at work, and she was like the entertainer. Everyone just
keeping everybody jovial.
Oh God, yeah, the customers loved her. And I mean, if you went shopping with my mom in the areas where she worked in places like Northfield and Wheelie Castle in Birmingham. And if you went shopping with her, you would be stopped every 5 or 10 minutes because everyone knew her through her work,
Yeah.
And to this day, it's a nightmare to go shopping with her.
So that first job you had, the office junior, how long were you there?
I stayed there for about 2 years. And what happened was the senior partner's legal assistant walked out one day. And so they needed someone else to support him day to day. So they threw me into what I described as the lion's den, shall we say. So I ended up sharing an office with the senior partner, who also happened to be a deputy district judge. But he had a great reputation in debt recovery and litigation. You know, as a high street practice, I mean, the firm had several offices across Birmingham. But, you know, I don't like to use that phrase, punching above your weight, but they really were, because, you know, they were acting for like a dozen insurance companies and, you know, a number of major corporates. And so I got a great grounding from him. I really did. I mean, it was hard work, and probably was a time when, you know, people didn't treat staff as well as they should do. He was certainly a hard taskmaster. And ultimately that's why I left. You know, as I got a bit older and wiser, I realized that no one else was tolerating what I was, and well, perhaps they were, but it didn't feel like it. So I just walked out one day, and really I've never looked back, you know, because I'd spent so much time down at the county court. That's where I ended up working for a time, because the staff down there knew me well and said, why don't you come and join us? You know, so I thought this is a no-brainer. So I went to work for the court, and the young lady that replaced me in the law firm, she had similar problems and moved on. And she came down to see me at court one day, and she was with another law firm, and she said, we've got just the job for you. And that was when I first entered into management, really. I followed her into the firm she was with and became an assistant manager in debt recovery. And it just feels like stepping stones since then. One thing's led to another. And, you know, so you've gone from office junior to ultimately, you know, I became a director at a global law firm, DWF. But I suppose I've always suffered from imposter syndrome. And that probably stems back to the way I was treated. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't all bad. You know, I just had a tough boss, really.
Yeah.
And but ever since, you know, I suppose to an extent felt like the office junior. So you might be sitting in a boardroom in a global law firm, but thinking, how did I get here? You know, do I deserve to be
Should
here?
I be in the room?
Exactly. And, you know, you have to tell yourself, well, I must be doing something right to get this far and to maintain it, you know. But, I mean, 3 times now I've been invited to work in High Court enforcement, and enforcement as a debt recovery specialist is my passion, really. So, you know, I've really enjoyed my time in High Court enforcement.
I'm sure you've got lots of tales to tell about things that you've done over the years, I'm assuming. Is there anything you could share with us?
About High Court enforcement?
Yes, anything interesting that you may have had to do, either, you know, what the debt was or how it was recovered. You know, I'm sure there's been some interesting ones in your career.
Well, I mean, a common theme for me, and I haven't touched on this yet really, but I've gone from working on the operational side of debt recovery onto the client side. And it sort of evolved into client relationship management, sales and marketing. And what I didn't tell you about my past was, from a very early age, I played the drums. So from the age of 5, I was having drum lessons. And interestingly, the other day I went to see James Blunt in concert, and his drummer went to the same school as me, you know, same drum teacher.
You weren't invited on stage to play then?
Sadly not, no. But I'm not really I wasn't a James Blunt fan. I am after seeing him live, I must admit. But I went because I wanted to see Carl, his drummer. And it was nice to see our drum teacher, Steve, was actually in the crowd with his nephew, who's another top session drummer, you know. And there are several drummers out there working with the best artists out there who come from that school in Birmingham, which is great, really.
I'll ask you a question then. What do you think? Have you seen Nandi, the young girl who's been doing stuff, drumming and like challenging through COVID, through the pandemic with Dave Grohl? And things like that, and she's been doing some really interesting stuff with different session musicians and bands since that. And I think she 11 or something like that. It's not very old.
I haven't seen a lot, but I've seen bits. And the reason I mention the drums is I got into a band and we were having great reviews. You know, we had connections into the music industry, so it felt like that was about to take off. for certain reasons that didn't happen. I won't say sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but the drugs bit, not for me, but for some people, they think you can't have rock and roll without that, and I think that's why things fell apart for us, sadly. But going back to always wanting to be in business, even when I was playing the drums, I wanted to be managing bands, promoting bands. Ultimately, I think the career I wanted was to be a concert promoter. And I did approach a chap called Maurice Jones, who owned a business based in Warsaw called MCP, Midland Concert Promotions.
Yeah.
And back in the day, they were the major rock promoter. I mean, Maurice and his colleagues created the Monsters of Rock Festival, which was massive. Their office in Warsaw, which interestingly subsequently did become the office of a debt recovery law firm. So there is a link there. But, I approached Maurice and I was shocked how supportive he was. I mean, not a lot of people know that Maurice was also the co-promoter of Live Aid. That's massive. I mean, that business was ultimately sold to Live Nation, who are the big promoters in the world today. But Maurice was so supportive. Again, when I found that offer letter from Cartwright and Lewis the other day, I found some letters from Maurice where I used to write to him and say, I want to do what you do. And how many people write those letters and they're ignored, never get a response. But Maurice would reply to every letter. And he used to try and, because he was the MD, he'd try and involve his colleagues and say, you need to speak to whoever. But they were busy out on the road and nothing would come of it. And it was quite funny reading these letters the other day. And I looked up one of the chaps that he told me to get in touch with, who's a top concert promoter today. And I found him on LinkedIn, actually. And I was thinking of actually contacting him and saying, Maurice told me 25 years ago that you'd be in touch. I'm still waiting, which is quite funny. But,
it's a long time to wait.
I know, yeah, exactly. But I mentioned concert promotion because I feel like, I wanted to live that rock and roll lifestyle. And I guess what I've done since I've moved on to the sort of client side and the promotional side of what we do, I still feel like to an extent you are sort of living that rock and roll lifestyle because you're on tour. I'm traveling across England and Wales, meeting people. I'm going to a lot of awards dinners, for example. You're living out of hotels. So it's as if in some way,
you are
I've sort of created my own world, to match, where I wanted to be.
So it didn't happen. You didn't end up down that promotional career. So what happened next?
Well, as I say, my legal career sort of ended up being one stepping stone to another. And the reason was, I think, in the early years that I'd be working for a firm and the work would drop off. And back then, when I was younger, it wasn't my job to bring in the work. I was expected just to get on with it. So if I felt that things were getting a bit quiet, I suppose I'd get itchy feet and think it's time to move on,
Yeah.
And so I'd end up moving to another law firm and work for some great firms over the years. I mean, Lee Crowder in Birmingham was a great firm that was subsequently taken over. Worked for Shakespeare's. I've mentioned DWF.
Yeah, I remember Shakespeare's. Yeah.
Yeah, and still going today. So I've had a vast experience over the years and really enjoyed it. But as a debt recovery specialist, when you think about it, the debt recovery process is generally very paper driven. So you'll write to someone demanding payment. If they don't pay, the court then send a claim form, another piece of paper. If they don't reply to that, they then send the judgment order, another piece of paper. Now, if you're the debtor sitting at home or in business, it's very easy to ignore several pieces of paper. So often the High Court enforcement agent is the first person to meet that debtor face to face.
Yeah.
And often that's what they're waiting for. People want to have that conversation face to face. Often they're, if there's no dispute and they're willing to pay, they've had issues and they just want to get that frustration off their chest. And once you've had that conversation, often people will pay up, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why I love high court enforcement, because it often makes the difference between being paid and not being paid. And I always say to people, over the years, I've found that it's a great indicator as to whether you will ever see that money. So when you've got your judgment, if it's a judgment for over £600 and it's not regulated under the Consumer Credit Act, you can very easily transfer it up to the High Court, so we can enforce it rather than the County Court bailiff. And
so what type of debts are these then? Are these where people have loaned money, or they, where people have been in business and there's been a falling out, and or somebody's taken a service and not paid for it?
I mean, the bulk is commercial debt, so it's goods and services supplied generally, but it can be any money judgment as long as it's not regulated by the Consumer Credit Act. So it wouldn't be something like a personal loan or a mortgage, but it could be corporate finance, for example. So any debt really, as long as it's over £600, can be transferred up to the High Court. I mean, we also now deal with unpaid employment tribunal awards and ACAS settlements, and that's a free service to the people that have been awarded those sums. And often, they've waited years to get to a tribunal. They've got an award and it's still not paid, and they're left waiting again. So it's great when we can recover that money for them.
Yeah, I'm going to say there was a big thing in Birmingham with the Birmingham City Council, wasn't there, where they'd mispaid people for many years on the same rates, and there was massive claims there. I mean, it must have been in many millions of pounds payouts for that, and I think that was up till only recently, wasn't it? Maybe a year ago, the final payouts, but I think it was running for some like 10 or 12 years. People making claims for it, and then eventually getting the payouts.
I remember that. It actually affected my aunt, who worked in a care home. So she'd been underpaid through the majority of her career, and she benefited from that, But I mean, for businesses, it's something to bear in mind in terms of, if you've overpaid someone in terms of wages, salary, or they've had too much holiday and they leave and they owe you that money, potentially you can be pursuing those people for those overpayments.
Yeah, it's whether people bother, though, isn't it? In a lot of cases, sometimes they just want to see the back of the individual. In a lot of cases, and it doesn't matter; they don't pursue it any further. We've been in a situation where people have effectively gone bankrupt and owed us money in the past, and I think we've had a number of those around anything between £600 and £2,000 a time. But there's not a lot you can do, because the creditors, the auditors come in, they look at the situation. There's usually nothing that they can recover for you anyway. So,
no, I mean, once someone's gone insolvent, it's highly unlikely that you'll see anything unless, a dividend's declared. And, it's important to remember that time is of the essence with debt recovery. What I've seen over the years is people leave it far too late. You need an efficient credit management process in your business. You need to know your customers, basically. So, when things do go wrong and people aren't paying you, you can tell people like me where we will find assets to seize or whatever, because often we're instructed where the debtor's already got more than several judgments. So you're joining a queue of creditors. And in high court enforcement, every writ has to be dealt with in turn. So the risk is, if you're at the end of the queue, by the time your priorities reach, there could be nothing left in the pot for you. So act sooner rather than later. I mean, some people worry about the fact that they're pursuing their customers. I mean, if they're not paying you, they're not great customers, are you? If someone's got a genuine problem, if you've got a customer who can't pay you for whatever reason's got a short-term cash flow problem, you would expect them to be on the phone to you, explaining what the problem is
and doing something about it. Yeah,
exactly. But if you've got radio silence, you need to do something about it.
Yeah, because they're not intending to pay you at all by then.
Well, that's it. I mean, interestingly, I think early on in my career, I was criticised for treating people fairly. You know, debtors would call me, and when we think about consumers, I'd be speaking to people who literally couldn't afford to eat, you know, and you've got clients asking you to recover significant sums from them.
Yeah.
You can't get blood out of a stone. If someone hasn't got the funds or assets, there's not a lot that I can do, you know. So you have to be realistic as well at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely. Is there a time period that you can't claim after, or is it forever as long as you've got some, documentary evidence that you've invoiced them and they've not paid?
Well, just to say, I'm not legally qualified, but
Oh,
there is a
all legal people put those things in place, don't they? Yeah.
just as a disclaimer. So
Yeah.
always seek legal advice. But I mean, generally, there's the Limitation Act, and generally on debts, you've got 6 years to pursue them, and then 6 years to enforce a judgment.
Yeah. Or 6 plus 6.
Well,
Or six in total.
Well, you've got 6 years to bring a claim, basically under limitation. Once you've obtained your judgment, you can't enforce it after 6 years. I mean, you can apply to extend the period. There's no guarantee that the court, would extend it.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's the difference now? What are you doing that's different today then with court enforcement services? What's the different with your current position?
Well, I think it's all part of that going from operations onto the other side, because it's all well and good having a great service, but you need to get that message out there and tell people about it. So, as I said earlier, ultimately I'm that promoter. I might not be promoting rock bands, but I'm promoting the great service that we provide. And throughout my career, I've been working with High Court enforcement from day one, so it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I've worked with most, if not all, of the people in the sector, the different companies over the years. And court enforcement services has always stood out to me, for doing things differently and getting the right results.
Yeah.
I had the benefit of working with a number of the senior management team in their previous business when we worked together. And, that stood with me. It's, lasting memory of having such a great working relationship with a team of people. So it's been great to be able to revisit that. And I think the key to the success is a combination of things, really. The business is very focused on looking after its clients. We work in a way where it's in close partnership with the clients, so they always know exactly where they stand and there are no surprises. And we also get great results in terms of recoveries, and the quality of reporting that people get. And, for you as someone working in IT, I think it's down to our IT as well, because we've developed a multi-award winning app which provides real-time reporting from the enforcement agents on the street through to the office and ultimately to our clients. We've then got a great system called Client View, which gives complete visibility to the clients so they can see everything that's going on in real time, 24/7.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the big difficulties. It's communication, isn't it?
It is.
We were talking. I had a guy called Mike Dingley on last week, and he works as an estate agent, and he was talking about the archaic process that's still in place, where when you buy a house and somebody else is selling that house, and all the communications and things are commonly by phone and paper. And there's very limited communication between all parties, only between certain parties. Has that changed in the High Court enforcement? Is a lot more of it automated, digital? Has it improved?
I think it's because it's all individual companies that are dealing with it. Although, ultimately we've got people in our businesses who are authorised High Court enforcement officers, and they're authorised by the Ministry of Justice, the Lord Chancellor himself, delegates his authority to the senior master in the High Court. So these authorised officers tend to be connected to a commercial business like ours, and then they supervise the agents doing the work out on the street. So currently, it's each business trying to do their best to create the right systems. But I mean, through people like the Civil Court Users Association, the High Court Enforcement Officers Association, we're lobbying for change currently, because we can't deal with those debts under £600. We understand the county court bailiffs have got significant backlogs and limited resources to deal with those debts, which prevents those creditors from having access to justice. So my hope is that in the near future, we will see that change. And
I would assume that's based on cost, isn't it? So the amount of cost incurred to actually recover that is not covered by the £600 or the fees associated with that £600 debt.
Yeah, well, you would expect that, there will be a fee to enforce it, which would be added to the debt, and then the cost of enforcement will be added as well. But, you would hope that, if that work does come into our domain, that, that any fee scale is appropriate to the size of the debt, because ultimately, you've got to treat people fairly. But it also begs the question, if that was to happen, would the court service come up with a solution for the way that's processed, or would it come to us as the individual companies to come up with a solution?
Yeah, that's and in my world, most businesses are going through this thing called digital transformation. So they're actually moving away from manual process to everything to be computerized. So each time you actually take part in the actual process, it's through some kind of computer interface, web interface, and it steps through, and everybody that's involved touches it through that same mechanism. And that's where most businesses are going these days, and also a lot of other areas. If you look at central government, a lot of things like applying for a passport and all the process of it's now becoming very digitalized, and that's what digital transformation is about. It's trying to automate the process, take away areas where there could be some error through people mistyping information and things, and making it a smoother process. But again, there are certain fields that it doesn't seem to be happening in. Conveyancing for properties is one. No one's done anything in that space. It sounds like there's a gap in the market for court enforcement as well, in the communication between all parties, other than what you're doing yourselves.
Yeah, I think it's because of the nature of it, where you've got the authorised officers all in their own individual companies, that makes it different. But I mean, I can only speak for our business, and obviously, we've got a very sophisticated case management system that's constantly evolving, and obviously, as we move forward, you do look at things like, AI. And one thing we do is look at, the debts that are coming to us at the front end, and making assessments as to, the viability of pursuing them. Because what we don't want is our clients throwing good money after bad at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's no point, is there? If you're not going to recover it, what's the point of spending the cost to try and recover it and end up being less, even more out of pocket?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's been really interesting then. And who would you see as a customer to you? Would that be people on the streets, business owners that have got money outstanding to them? Are they the people that you want to speak to?
We're literally acting for all kinds of people and organisations, from what we describe as individual claimants, so the man on the street, some people would describe as a litigant in person, SME businesses, but right up to major corporates who've got their own in-house legal operations that instruct us. We also do a lot of work in the utility sector, so we act for 4 of the big 6 energy companies, more than several water companies, and a lot of the other utility companies. We work with local authorities and their sundry debts. So, across the board, really, anyone who's got a debt to recover and wants it dealt with efficiently,
Yeah, I think the energy industry is going to be even worse soon, because we already had skyrocketing costs anyway. But with the news of what's happening in Ukraine today, I think the energy prices could be surging even more, yeah, in the very near
Exactly.
future. So there could be a lot of more debt out there.
I think so. And I think one of the things we're seeing already, and we will see more of, is a lot of consolidation in the energy sector, where companies are being swallowed up by others. So that to maintain the supply really for the customers through the
Yeah.
regulators.
Well, as we've been going along, we've been putting up Neil's details. So if you want to know more about court enforcement services, the website's there. We've also got Neil's LinkedIn profile as well. So you can always contact Neil directly through LinkedIn and communicate with him. So you can get some more information about what they do and where they go. We were going to come on to a couple of questions, but when we were talking about earlier, you told me a little bit about something else. But I thought, did you want to introduce that? The situation when when you were younger, and what we're coming on to, that adventure question we were going to talk about. Is that something you'd like to introduce at this point, or should we go straight to the adventure question?
I'm not sure I've got an answer to the adventure question, but yeah, I'm happy to
Yeah,
talk.
it's just you were talking about the difficulty you'd had working in law because of a particular situation, which I prefer you to tell people about. But also, one thing we were talking about is that there are other people out there at the moment that could be in a very similar situation and feeling quite uncomfortable with their lives because of the situation. So the floor's yours.
Thank you. But I think it's a good time to talk about it because it's LGBTQ History Month,
Oh yes,
and
yeah,
so it is the right time really to be talking about it. And I'm proud now to be an out gay man. I never thought I'd be married with a child, but here I am. And but when I was younger, I really struggled with my sexuality, and I think partly that was because I came from a very traditional Christian family. I'm proud to still be a Christian to this day, but yeah, for example.
when did you know that you weren't how you look from the outside, as it were? That's not an appropriate thing. When did you know that you were gay? Was it quite early on, or did it develop over time?
I guess it developed for me over time. It became a realization. I think most people would say they always knew, and
Yeah,
some people know from a very early age. It certainly isn't a choice that you make.
no,
You are what you
no,
are.
that's true.
And I do wonder if part of me knew but just blocked it out because it's not something I wanted, you know, to be, I suppose, because it didn't fit, with the spec that my family would have for me. So
So what age did you think that I know I am gay now, but I know we're going to talk about that. You covered that up for quite a while because of the work you were doing. So when did you know that you were?
I never covered it up for work. I mean,
Oh, no, you didn't. No.
no,
Uh,
I wouldn't. Well, I didn't cover it up for work. The best way I can put it is that I didn't really know who I was in terms of my
ah,
sexuality, and
so it was more about you weren't sure yourself about yourself.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah. Through lack of experience, I didn't know who I was, and I literally fell into a relationship with a girl, was very happy, very much in love, and just realised over time that wasn't for me.
yeah,
Over time, I realised that fundamentally that was wrong for me. It wasn't right. So I did end up coming out, and funnily enough, from a work perspective, I confided in one close colleague. And I think by the end of the afternoon, that was over lunch. By the end of the afternoon, I had been outed. I don't know if an email had been sent out to all staff, but suddenly everyone knew
yeah.
that I was gay. That upset me at the time. But when I look back, I think it probably did me a favour because it probably avoided a lot of difficult conversations.
Yeah,
But
because
I think
when you knew, you didn't have to go and tell everybody then, did you?
no, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think what I have realised over the years is that you've just got to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Just be yourself. And I mean, one of the things I talked to you about before was that one of the things that concerns me is you've got a lot of people at university who are out as gay. They then go into employment and go back into the closet for fear of it affecting their career, you know.
Yeah.
Which really saddens me. And you know, you get people, you know, contemplating suicide because of, you know, the struggle in coming to terms with their sexuality, which when you've come out the other side of it, you know, it's like you're born again, really, just being true to yourself. You know, we're all human at the end of the day. People make a big thing about their sexuality, but in reality, I believe in most people, it's quite a small part of who you are, you know.
Yeah. And it's terrible if people feel to that extreme that they feel like taking their lives because of, you know, just, you know, how they feel about themselves. That's not a nice situation to be in, is it at all?
No. And I mean, in the workplace, for example, you know, I've experienced good and bad in terms of people treating you in the right and proper way based on your sexuality. And it's been great to work in some organisations like court enforcement services and some of the law firms where you are very well supported and just treated like everyone else. And it's great to see some real visible allies out there who do support you.
Yeah, and we spoke briefly earlier. You do a lot of support for, you know, some of the bodies as well. So you were talking about some of the bodies you're on at the moment that are in court enforcement and other areas. So remember, we took your abbreviations off the end of your name. We thought it'd be good to put those back in at some point. You know, was it FC?
Yes, so FCICM is fellow of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management, and I'm proud to be involved in the Institute of Credit Management for many years. I'm currently a member of their advisory council, and you know, anything we can do to promote credit management as a career, and obviously the benefits to business that we've talked about today. I'm also the immediate past president of IRRV in the West Midlands, and that's the Institute of Revenues, Ratings and Valuation. So anything to do with council tax and business rates, for example. I'm also involved in the Civil Court Users Association, so lobbying for changes like we discussed earlier.
Do you have time to work with all these things?
Yeah, a lot of extracurricular activities, but you know, a lot of it benefits our business. Court Enforcement Services is a corporate partner to the Chartered Institute of Credit Management, so it's all relevant to the day job. I mean, going back to LGBTQ, I'm really proud as well to be a co-founder of the Alliance Network in the Midlands. And the Alliance Network is like a staff network that we created for people to bring people together and support one another.
Yeah.
Because it's all well and good when you're working in a big law firm that's got its own staff network that can support you. But what about someone who's an individual, who's gay, working for a metal basher in the Black Country? Where's their staff network?
Yeah.
So the idea was that the Alliance Network would create that staff network for you. And over the years, it's attracted several hundred members now, which is fantastic. And, you know, businesses of all sizes, from sole traders right up to, you know, major corporates like Rolls-Royce and the banks and accounting practices. So, you know, that's been a great thing.
Is it worth us introducing your partner into this? Because I believe you're well looked after with chocolate at home as well.
Well, it's interesting. You know, over the years, my partner Lance has tried all kinds of jobs and businesses. And I thought he'd found his calling when he started working in care, because he really took to that and, you know, clearly did a great job and was well regarded in that. He decided to move away from that. And interestingly, a lot of my family in Birmingham have worked for Cadbury's over the years. And from hearing their stories, and I guess watching Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he decided that he wanted a career in chocolate, you know.
So he's your Willy Wonka, is he then?
I wouldn't go that far, but you know, he did approach Cadbury's to explore career opportunities. And, you know, to be fair, these days they're few and far between because, you know, a lot of them are temp contracts or 0-hour contracts. So he thought, I'll just try and do it myself. So he literally started making chocolate himself, Jinx's Artisan Chocolates, and it's gone really well. It's really popular. He's got clients in Scotland, in the USA. He's done really well with it. Yeah. So
well, I'm just hoping my wife doesn't see this because it could be quite expensive in chocolate afterwards.
Yes, I mean that word artisan does seem to make things a bit more expensive, but
Definitely.
I mean everyone that tries it loves it, and I just love the fact that he's used our family name as the brand. You know. So,
yeah, it's a good name, isn't it?
It is very popular.
Yeah. It works well. So let's come back to our adventure. So, what was the most adventurous thing? Yeah, because I led into it with this, you know, a little bit of the story. So, do you believe that, you know, coming out was your most adventurous thing at the time, or is there anything more adventurous you think you've done?
You did make me think of that when you mentioned the word adventurous. I must admit, you know, that was a really difficult time for me. And you know, I was sat in a studio behind my drum kit one day, and I just couldn't think of a way to resolve that at the time. You know, and it was a life-changing moment coming out. It was like being born again. So that made me think of being adventurous. But the only other thing that springs to mind, a lot of my family live in New England in the States.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that always sticks in my mind is my cousin's husband taking me out on his boat, and we were trying water skiing and neilboarding, which just wasn't for me. As soon
you spent more time in the water than on the water, then.
Well, actually, I spent more time in the air. Some were still through the air, I think. But so I'll never forget that. I mean, I just believe he was driving the boat far too fast for me. But yeah,
I've spent some time in New England myself. I used to work for a company that was their head office was in North Andover, which is about 25 miles north of Boston. So I used to spend quite a bit of time going there, and I think you used to go there for about 2 weeks, every about 6 to 8 weeks, and did it for a couple of years. Amazing place, around there. It's like I watched something the other day, and it talked about the Salem witch trials, and I've actually been to Salem, and I've been to the museum, and it's just the experience. I mean, it's quite eerie going into the churchyard there where all the buried, because they were all hung, weren't they? And some were crushed, actually. Some men were crushed with rocks, part of it. It's a terrible time, really, but it's quite an eerie place to go to. But I do like that area. It's a wonderful area.
It's interestingly that there are still numerous witches living in Salem, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, my Aunt Sheila was Birmingham born and bred, happened to marry a GI, and followed him back to Draycote in Massachusetts, where my family live. And I've been visiting there since the early 80s. And it makes me think of my parents, because the first time we visited, they were desperate to go and live out there. But I think one thing that I've learned is that my parents were very overcautious, so they didn't make that move. But I absolutely love it out there. So my dream is to retire to Cape Cod.
It is lovely around there, definitely. So coming on to the second thing, something else you get really good option for in Cape Cod area especially is, what's the best meal you've ever had? What was it and why?
Well,
where was it as well?
It's funny you should say that, because it was with Aunt Sheila in Draycote, Massachusetts. And it was what she described as a seafood supper. I mean, I love anything deep fried.
So, fish and chips, then?
Well, basically, just a whole load of different seafood, but deep fried with amazing fries, And I mean, sadly, Lance, my partner, has become allergic to seafood overnight
Oh,
a few
dear.
years ago,
Yeah.
which means I can't eat seafood anymore, and I absolutely love it. You know? But,
It's quite common, isn't it? Especially shellfish allergies are quite common. You know, there's more people you hear of it every day, so it's quite strange. But that sounds like an amazing experience. Was that was in a local restaurant then in the area? Was it?
no, because she was elderly, we had it delivered from a restaurant
Oh,
to the
yeah.
house.
So you
But
had it at home.
I've
Yeah.
had some very memorable dinners in Provincetown is an amazing place in Cape Cod, and yeah, in restaurants where you're literally on the beach looking out at night, sunset, very memorable, you know.
Yeah, lobster rolls are quite common up there as well, aren't they? There's a
They
lot of good
are. I
lobster,
mean,
you know, from the coast.
oh God, I love Maine as well, and you know, that's the place for your lobsters. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So it's been great having you on. Any final thing you'd like to tell everybody before we shut things down?
But thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it. And,
Good,
you know, just remember cash is king in business, but
definitely.
information is too. So, like I said earlier, know your customers. And if all else fails, let me know.
That's it. So we've been popping some banners up as we're going along, not just Neil's, but we're talking about in the hot seat. So if anybody's interested in joining us and telling a bit about their life, you know, what they've been up to work-wise, tell them about your brand, your business, and what you're trying to achieve. You know, you can always join us. Drop myself or Rachel an email, lee.cassidy@tactiletechnology.com or rachel.gould@tactiletechnology.com, and we'll get you slotted in. I've actually got a butcher next week. Rachel doesn't know too much about it yet, but she'll be asking me later. But somebody I know who runs a craft butchers in Withall, and he came to me the other day and said, I saw one of your videos, and you know, I'd love to do that. So we've got Chris next week on Thursday telling us all about craft butchery and what he's planning to do. But I've seen him on TV because he actually did quite a few like butchery competitions, and a couple of them were actually on TV. So I've seen him on TV many years ago, you know, doing butchery and things. So, you know, quite an interesting thing, especially if you're in the Withall area, local hero in the local craft butcher shop there. So that's 2 p.m. Next Thursday with Chris Lacey. So thanks ever so much for joining us, Neil. You know, if you want to stay on afterwards, and we'll just have a quick catch up and see where we are, and you know, just go through a few things at the end. But I don't know if you've noticed the time; it's nearly 3 o'clock. It's 10 to 3, so that time has flown for me. I don't know about for yourself, but thanks ever so much, and I'll hopefully see everybody next Thursday. I don't believe we've got anybody in for this Thursday, and I'm actually taking Tuesday off because I'm on a course. So it'll be next Thursday next week, the next one with Chris Lacey. So thanks ever so much, everybody, and we'll catch you in a second now.
Thanks, Lou.